Hang on a sec. All right, that's better. Okay, so chapter 24 is the digestive system. You have to remember that every cell in your body is a living entity, and that means that it's going to need food, it's going to need oxygen, and it's going to need to get rid of waste. So with that in mind, your digestive system helps to convert the food that you have eaten and consumed into something that can be useful to those cells and be delivered to those cells. So pretty much your digestive system acts like a Meals on Wheels program. It provides nourishment for over 100 trillion cells, and it basically has its own quality control. If it isn't important, it doesn't keep it. And if it doesn't keep it, it disposes of it. You defecate, you get rid of it. Hang on one second. Sorry, I keep doing this. Okay, so when you think of a Meals on Wheels program, they are preparing the food, they're basically making it into something that somebody can actually eat. They don't just deliver groceries, they're delivering these pre-prepared meals that pretty much people only have to put in the microwave. Now, if you think about that, they, hang on a second. Ugh. They're having to not only prepare the meals, but if you think about, let's say I'm making somebody sandwiches for a meal, right? Then I've got the wrappers and the containers and the things that came from the grocery store that eventually I'm going to have to get rid of. It's not like I go, oh yeah, this wrapper for the bread, I've got to keep that forever. No, once it's done, I get rid of it. Same type of thing. It's making your food that you've consumed into something that your cells can actually use, and then distributing it out, and then whatever isn't used, it just basically gets tossed out with the poop. So the anatomy of the digestive system. You've got two major components when it comes to your digestive system. You've got the digestive tract, which is basically a tube that extends from your mouth to your anus. It is one continuous tube. If I got you to swallow a tube and I just kept pushing it and pushing it and pushing it, eventually it would come out the other end because it is a continuous tube. The only kind of difference between the different sections are sphincter muscles that kind of isolate the different organs. You also have the accessory organs. The accessory organs are going to be the organs that actually are not in the tube, but they put product into the tube. For example, your salivary glands. Your salivary glands are not in your mouth. I can't show them to you because they're not there. But they do make saliva and they do put it into my mouth. There's one under your jaw, there's one under your tongue, there's one up here next to your ear, but the glands themselves are not there. They're just putting their product into the tubing. So we consider these accessory organs because they're not in the tubing, but they put product into the tubing. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. Okay, so looking at the regions of that digestive tract, of the tubing, you have the oral cavity, your mouth, right? And the accessory organ there is going to be the salivary glands that I just mentioned. You have the pharynx. So going from the mouth to right here, not yet all the way down, okay? So you've got your mouth, you've got this part here and this part here. This is actually the pharynx, okay? We mentioned the pharynx in the respiratory system, but the pharynx is basically above where we're deciding whether this is going to go to respiratory or digestive. So you've got the mouth going back, that first little tube is the oropharynx. Then right below that, right before you make that, what's the word I'm looking for? Not diversion. You probably know what word I'm looking for, and I just can't think of it. the fork in the road. I'll go with that. To go to respiratory or to go to digestive, you've got that laryngopharynx, which is the one right above your voice box. Right below that, though, you've got the esophagus. The esophagus is that tube that basically connects your pharynx to your stomach. So as far as accessory organs in the pharynx, you've got mucus glands, making it sticky and slick. Esophagus, same thing. You've got that kind of mucus gland lining that helps to make things slick so that they'll move easier. Next in line is going to be the stomach. Okay, so the stomach is going to be kind of an expansion of this tubing. And to be honest, it actually does have quite a few tube-like glands and mucus cells. You got to remember that your stomach is making acid, it's making certain enzymes. There have to be glands in the stomach lining to be able to do that. After the stomach is the small intestine, and you actually have 3 different parts to that small intestine. You have the duodenum, which some people call the duodenum. I like duodenum because it helps me to spell it. You've got the jejunum, and you've got the ileum. The ileum is the last part before you get to the large intestine. Now, as far as accessory organs go in your small intestine, you actually have multiple. You've got the liver, you've got the gallbladder, and you have the pancreas, all of which are secreting products into the tubing of the small intestine. I'll admit all of that happens like right at the beginning of the small intestine, but the fact that those products are being put in there is still cause for it to be an accessory organ or a set of accessory organs. In the large intestine, you also have several regions. You've got the cecum, the colon, the rectum, and the anal canal. Now, all of these, as far as accessory organs go, it's mucus glands. So remember I said mucus was kind of sticky? So the waste products that we are getting rid of, we try as hard as we can to take water out of those waste products. We don't want to leave any water there. We want it back in our body. So that kind of makes it dry. Well, if it keeps getting drier and drier and drier, eventually it's going to cause the issue of constipation. Having mucus along the sides of this tube actually helps to keep that stuck together, and it makes it slick so that it'll actually keep moving. And then finally, the last part is the anus. This is our exit for this stuff. Okay, so again, exit, I don't need any accessory organs there. I just need stuff to go. And since I've kind of slicked everything up in the large intestine, I don't need anything extra. When it comes to the functions of your digestive system, there are 8. You have ingestion, mastication, propulsion, mixing, secretion, digestion, absorption, and elimination. So, ingestion. I'm going to say this has nothing to do with your mouth. Okay? Ingestion is the introduction of a liquid or solid food into the stomach. Okay? Now, why the clarification? Because I can put stuff in your stomach without it ever going through your mouth or your esophagus. If you have a G tube, I can still put stuff into your stomach. So when we say ingestion, it's the basically addition of water or solid food products into the stomach. Okay, so keep that in mind. Now, mastication. Mastication is the process by which food is taken into the mouth and chewed. When I say masticate, that means to chew your food. So mastication involves basically you chewing with your teeth and breaking those things into smaller and smaller pieces. This is actually required for good digestion. I know, don't eat so fast, chew your food. You need that so that your stomach, okay. Yes, believe it or not, that is true. So if you think about, let's say I have an inch by inch cube of beef. Okay, so I've got a steak and I cut an inch chunk out of it. And I put it into a beaker of acid. The only things that are being exposed to that acid are going to be the surface of that cube of beef. All of that stuff that's in the core is not being exposed to the acid, right? So when you chew, you're basically taking this and you're dicing it into smaller and smaller pieces, meaning that you have more surface exposed, not only to the acid in the stomach, but also to the enzymes in your entire digestive tract. So you're actually aiding in, I guess, accessibility of all of those enzymes to the surface of that food so that they can start breaking it down. Now, that's mastication. So we've got ingestion, we've got mastication. Propulsion. If anybody watches Star Trek, you know about propulsion engines. Propulsion is the movement of food from one end of the digestive tract to the other. Total time for this takes about 24 to 36 hours. Now, I know some of you are going, well, there's sometimes when I eat something and I just immediately go. Technically, it's not what you just ate. It's something that was in your intestines to begin with from earlier. But normally, that time frame is almost a day, if not longer. So, that propulsion. You've got deglutition. This is swallowing a mass of food, which we call a bolus, from the oral cavity into the esophagus. So when this happens in your esophagus, basically what's happening is you've got this mass of food and your esophagus squeezes and then pushes down. So you're squeezing, almost like you're milking something. Squeeze and push, squeeze and push. This is what happens in the esophagus, deglutition, okay? Peristalsis is responsible for moving things along the digestive tract. So you've got kind of the same thing, except it's squeezing and moving. So let's say your intestines, you've got that kind of squeeze and move, squeeze and move, squeeze and move, squeeze and move, going through the tubing of your intestine. So that's peristalsis. Peristaltic waves. Okay, so let's say I have a hose and I'm trying to move a marble through a hose, right? If I'm trying to squeeze that marble down and the tube over here is sealed shut, I'm going to get it to that point, but then it's going to stop because this is already sealed, right? So when we talk about that peristaltic pushing, the tubing in front of it has to relax so that that push can happen and it'll keep going down the tube, okay? So those are the waves. In front of the bolus, you can actually see it here. In front of the bolus, the circular muscle relaxes, okay? And behind it, the contractions are pushing that bolus forward. Now, mass movements. This happens in the large intestine. The large intestine is the one that's kind of a U shape around all of the squiggly small intestine. Your large intestine has what we call mass movements. So with your small intestine, you've got peristalsis, but it's usually these kind of short, and then you've got kind of some squeezing movements to kind of mix everything up. With your large intestine, that's not really the goal. The goal is to get the garbage out, pack it in a tight enough bundle so that when you defecate, when you go number 2, you're actually going to push something out that 1 is solid enough that it'll come out, and 2 is solid enough that when you squeeze with your muscles, it'll actually have something to push against to get it to come out. So with your large intestine, we have something called mass movements. Mass movements are basically starting at the beginning of the large intestine. We squeeze and go all the way to the end. We squeeze and go all the way to the end, okay? When we do that, basically at the end here, we're packing that garbage material so that it's that semi-solid mass that we can actually defecate later. Might help, I don't know. Finally, or well, not finally, because there are 8 of them, but next, we've got mixing. This is the movement of the food back and forth in the digestive tract to mix it with all of the secretions. We've got segmental contractions in our small intestine. That's what this is, okay, that help to kind of mix everything up. Now, I know that your stomach moves around. Your stomach moves around and basically helps to mix the food with the acid and the pepsin and things like that in your stomach. But most of the enzymes that we have come from our small intestine. So if you have this solid mass of food in your intestine and you're trying to get enzymes into the core of that, it doesn't help to have this big solid mass. So what happens in that tube is I start to squeeze different rings, and that smushes it around and kind of helps to kind of get all of the enzymes into the core of that bolus of food. So those mixing motions are actually helping us with digestion. It makes it more efficient because I'm not just putting it on the outside. I've squished this open and now it's getting into the core and where every part and piece is. Secretion. As the food travels through the digestive tract, secretions are added to lubricate, to liquefy, to buffer, and to digest food. So something else you have to keep in mind. Enzymes and acids have no personality. They can't tell you friend from foe. They can't do any of that. If I pour acid on you, it's not going to go, oh yeah, that's Miss Williams' student. I shouldn't burn that. So there are quite a few things that we have to be very careful with when it comes to the digestive tract, because basically that's what we're doing. We're putting acid and we're putting enzymes that can't tell the difference between our food and us. Okay, so these secretions and things like that, yes, there are things like enzymes, and yes, there are things like acid, but we also have buffers. Buffers help to basically control the pH. We also have lubricant to help things move along, and we can add fluid to things to make them more liquidy. Mucus is responsible for the lubrication of the digestive tract, and it prevents both mechanical and chemical digestion. So again, if I'm working with an acid in the lab, I put gloves on my hands, right? So when it comes to you putting these things inside, mucus basically coats the lining so that if an enzyme comes in contact with it, or if an enzyme or a acid comes in contact with it, you've got that mucus lining that's kind of like the gloves. It protects the lining. Water is going to be additional to help basically aid in liquefying our food, as well as osmosis. Don't forget the movement of water. We talked about that way back in chapter 3, I think, in AP1. Chapter 3, I think. The liver also secretes things that help to break down fats. So fats are one of those things that it doesn't act like a protein and it doesn't act like a sugar. So you kind of have to have really specific things to break those down, because unlike a sugar or a protein, they don't like water. The liver actually helps us to get that accomplished. It helps us to do that. Now, the enzymes, they come from all over the place. I know a lot of people think, oh, well, the stomach's responsible for most of the digestion. Actually, almost every place that you're going is going to contribute to digestion, almost. Notice I said almost, I didn't say always. So you've got enzymes in your oral cavity. You've got salivary amylase. You've got lingual lipase. These are enzymes that actually help to digest amylase starches and lipase fats. Not to the point that, it's going to completely dissolve, but it kind of starts the digestion process. You also have enzymes and acid in your stomach. So that's going to help to kind of break down proteins. You've got the small intestine that is getting stuff from the pancreas, from the liver, and from the gallbladder, all of which are helping to break down the food products that are in there. As well, the lining of the small intestine also has several enzymes that as the food kind of gets smeared across it, they come in contact with those enzymes and it helps to break them down. So you're taking these big, large, complex food molecules and making them into small, simple molecules that hopefully the cells can absorb. Now, digestion. It's breaking down large food molecules into its component parts. So you've got two types of digestion. You've got mechanical digestion, you've got chemical digestion. Mechanical means physical, somehow movement. Taking a knife and chopping something up. That's mechanical digestion, and that's what your teeth do. Your teeth are basically a knife, and as you're chewing, it's mechanically breaking this, let's say, cube of beef or hamburger bite into smaller and smaller pieces. So the mechanical digestion happens through the process of mastication, and it mixes the food with your saliva and the enzymes that are in your mouth. Chemical digestion is going to be the enzymes and the acid, okay? So I just talked about the saliva in your mouth and the enzymes. The enzymes would be the chemical digestion. That actually is taking something like a starch and breaking it into a disaccharide. So it's further than what your teeth can actually do. Large organic molecules must be digested in order to be absorbed. Minerals, water, and vitamins, they just come in as is. I don't need to change water into anything else. I don't need to change a vitamin into anything else. I use that as is. I just pull it in. Same with salt, sodium, chloride, potassium. Those I just pull in. I don't need them to be changed into something different. Absorption. It's the movement of molecules out of the digestive tract into the circulation or to the lymphatic system. It's molecule dependent. You can use the process of diffusion or facilitated diffusion, active transport, symport, or endocytosis. Again, it just depends on what we're moving. If we're talking about a fat isn't just going to go because fats don't like water. So if I'm trying to just absorb them, it's not going to like that. So you actually have to transport that through the lymphatic system, making something called micelles, okay, or micelles, depending on where you learned it. Okay, finally, we have elimination. Okay, finally, this is the 8th function. It's the process by which waste products of digestion are removed. Remember I said, if I've got a Meals on Wheels program, it's not like I don't end up with waste products. So it occurs primarily in the large intestine. Water and salts are absorbed, and liquefied material is basically converted into that semi-solid mass that I was talking about earlier, the feces. And elimination, if you want to, instead of call it pooping, you can call it defecation, because you're basically getting rid of the waste products that were created after you processed the food that you ingested.